Hello everyone and welcome to another very nice game from the 2021 candidates tournament. It's Wang versus Alexander Grischuk, and it's a really wonderful game. But before we check out the actual game, I would just like to mention some of you have been asking in the comments how are people qualified for the candidates tournament. So I'll just briefly mention this before we check out the game. You can skip it if you already know or if you're not interested. But it basically says so very nicely here, even on Wikipedia. Wikipedia can be a place where you can find a lot of misinformation, but for so far that I've seen regarding chess, not so much. People who are interested in chess usually write it how it is, and these are the players that have qualified for the candidates tournament. So Fabiano Caruana, obviously, as he was the 2018 World Championship runner-up, he faced Magnus for the title, he lost, and as a consolation prize he got qualified for the next candidates tournament. Then we have the top two finishers at the Chess World Cup 2019. Those were Temur Rajabov and Ding Liren. Of course, Rajabov withdrew from the tournament, and then Maxim Vachier-Lagrave serves as replacement for Rajabov. And Maxim got in via the highest average rating, or rather Anish Giri got in via the highest average rating, but since one more place freed up when Rajabov withdrew, then they entered two people via the highest average rating. Then we have the top finisher of the FIDE Grand Swiss tournament in 2019. Wang won the tournament, so he qualified via that. I think he had like 8 points, same as Fabiano Caruana. And then we have Alexander Grischuk and Yanni Pomnishi, with Grischuk being the winner of the FIDE Grand Prix 2019. Those a couple of tournaments. It's a series of tournaments that goes on through the year, and then whoever wins qualifies. So Grischuk as the winner and Yanni Pomnishi as the runner-up. And of course we have the wild card chosen by the organizer, subject to eligibility criteria. You can read this criteria for yourself if you're interested just by clicking on it, not by clicking on this video, but on the Wikipedia article. It's Kirill Alexeyenko. He's the highest non-qualifier in the FIDE Grand Swiss. That was won by Wang followed by Fabiano Caruana, and then Kirill Alexeyenko got third place, but as Fabi, who got second place, was also qualified by losing the match to Magnus in 2018, then Alexeyenko got in by being third in the FIDE Grand Swiss. So that being said, let's check out the game. Now you know how these gentlemen even came to be here. So Wang with the white pieces opens with e4. We have e6 by Grischuk. He sticks to the French defense. We have d4, d5, sorry about that, and knight to c3 now. We have knight to f6, and now e5, the Steinitz variation, advancing the pawn, pushing the knight back, knight f to d7, and now knight c to e2. Looks odd, we've already played with that piece, but these are very strong players. They can break opening principles. It's not a problem. So here c5, striking in the center, you prepared it with this knight move, and now c3, strengthening the center. Here we have knight to c6, and now comes f4. Bishop to e7, and now knight to f3. And now, while Grischuk could castle here, he prefers to strike in the center right away with f6. That's how it works. That's how chess works. If you play the French, you have to play f6. We have bishop to e3, and here Grischuk castles. We have g3, now creating this very powerful formation, sort of a Christmas tree formation, and queen to b6 now, putting more pressure on the center here, also attacking the b2 pawn. So queen to d2, how defends, and now this is the moment that everyone was so impressed with. Here there actually is one game. Gatakamsky had it against Ding Liren in the 2011 Aeroflot Open, where f captures on e5 was played, and Ding was able to win that game. But here Grischuk actually played c captures on d4, and it is on this move, on move 12, on move 11, that Grischuk spent 72 minutes for this capture, and everyone thought this was very funny, that it was kind of expected, but was it really? Because Ding played f captures on e5 and he won the game. So here Grischuk spent so much time on a completely new move. So after c captures on d4 and after 72 minutes, it is only as of this move that we have a completely new game. So let's see how it continues. We have knight f captures on d4, and now knight to c5. Now white is threatening a lot of nasty discoveries because the queen is on b6, but now knight to c5, and this knight is now sufficiently defended. So here e captures on f6, by how bishop captures on f6, and now only now that the bishop no longer guards the knight, we have knight to b3 with a double attack on the knight. But it's not a problem because the white queen is also somewhat awkwardly placed here on d2, and now knight to e4. Grischuk offers a trade of queens, and if you go for this captures and captures, then we enter sort of an endgame. For example, bishop c5, attack the rook, black will capture the knight while attacking the rook on a1, and after a captures, let's say rook e8, and we continue this game with Grischuk having a better center. His pawn structure is a little bit better, and he still has the bishop pair. White is probably still better here, but you know, not much for white to hope for. So here, Hao decides to keep the queens on the board. He plays queen d3. Now there's still an attack on Grischuk's queen. Queen back to c7, and now bishop to g2. Just continuing development. Now there's a double attack on the knight. So here, knight back to d6. Now Grischuk wants to shift this knight to c4 and shift, this knight to c4 and shift this knight perhaps to f5 to put additional pressure here. And those will be some excellently placed knights. So here, bishop back to f2. Getting the bishop out of the range of those knights, knight to c4, and now queen to c2. The b2 pawn is under attack, so we need to defend it. Queen to c2, and now knight to e7, preparing knight to f5 most likely. However, after Hao castled here, Grischuk does not continue with knight to f5, although it seems like a reasonable idea, keeping a very nice control over that e3 square. Grischuk goes for the very active e5. And this serves a lot of purposes. For example, it gets rid of the backwards e6 pawn. It frees up this diagonal for the bishop to get into the game, and this will save black a lot of time. So here Hao captures on e5, but not automatically recapturing, but rather bishop to f5, developing the bishop for free as it comes with tempo. So you have to move the queen, or maybe you don't. Here, Hao did not move the queen. Here, Hao plays the move from the thumbnail, and that is e captures on f6. And this is just a very, very bold queen sacrifice. Now the queen has to be accepted, otherwise you're just down material. So bishop captures on c2, now f captures on e7, grabbing another piece, attacking the rook. So rook f to e8, and now comes knight to f4. Now asking black, do you want to capture this pawn, or do we, not much for black in this, because if captures then captures, and that's just terrible for black. But maybe also instead of moving the rook, you might consider something like queen captures on e7, but that's pretty bad. Just bishop captures on d5, and then we lose this knight, so nothing going on there. So here instead, rook f to e8, and only now knight to f4. So knight to f4, like we said, with the idea of capturing the knight if rook captures. So here we have knight to b6, now getting the knight out of the way, also defending the pawn a little bit here on d5, and you can't really allow black to consolidate, so you have to capture now. So knight captures on d5, we have knight captures and bishop captures on d5, delivering this with check, king to h8, and now knight to d4. And now, what do you do here? Well, black needs to figure out how to get back into the game. The bishop on c2 is under attack, so you still don't have time to pick up the e7 pawn. We have queen to d7, now attacking the bishop here, and this would be good for black. If black could eliminate one of white's bishops, that'd be pretty great. But of course, Hao will not allow that. He plays c4. Now this bishop is here indefinitely. You're really not getting rid of it. Even if something like b5 in the future comes, you can always play b3. Not a problem. This bishop is staying here forever. And now comes bishop to g6. And this is, as the bishop is under attack, you have to move it. And this is perhaps, maybe, just maybe, one of the moments where you could maybe play it a little bit better. And I was, since I didn't cover this game yesterday, I only covered it today. I left this position on the board overnight, so my computer really crunched it to depth 50. And the bishop to d3 seems like a small improvement that could go a long way. Point is, I will show you what happened in the game. Point is that if bishop to d3 first, we force this rook to move, and we kind of want to bring this rook into the game and, you know, have our rooks on e and f file. But maybe after bishop to d3, now that the rook needs to move, for example, rook f to d1, now we move the bishop, and now white rooks might be a little bit more discoordinated. For example, if knight to e6, we can now capture on e7. And now with ideas of maybe even giving up the rook for the knight. So after knight f4, now we can, you know, just play whatever we want. Let's say bishop to c2, attack the rook, rook d2, bishop back to a4. And now white's pieces are not so harmoniously placed maybe as you'll see in the game. It is possible. I mean, it's depth 50, who knows what's going on. But okay, Grischuk here decided to go back right away with bishop to g6, and of course now how just continues in pretty much the same way, but the rooks will be on e1 and f1. So here we have knight to e6 as planned. The bishop is coming to d4. You will want to put pressure on g7. Rook captures on e7, and now rook a to e1. And this is what we were talking about. So maybe not allowing this for the rooks would have been better, but they were both extremely low on time, especially Grischuk, who, like I said, spent 72 minutes on that move. But they were both very low on time at this point. So here bishop to f7, and this is not. Bishop to f5 is the way to go here, but it's hard to realize that if we don't play bishop to f7 first. But by playing bishop to f7, it seems like the idea is the same, but it's really not. So here, feel free to pause the video and try to find, the best move for how, while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting the incredibly complicated knight captures on g7. Also, for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, this is what how played. And now we have so many options and so little time, and Grischuk needs to decide what to do here. Does he capture the bishop on d5? Does he capture the knight on g7? Does he capture the rook on e1? These are all very good options, and it's hard to say which one is better. So let's just check the obvious first. What happens if you capture the knight? Well, then the point is then the bishop pair becomes fully operational, and you have to do something. King to g8. Now we're gonna play rook captures on e7, queen captures, and now we're gonna eliminate this bishop. So captures, captures, and captures with check. Let's say king captures, and we get this endgame where Hao would be up 2 pawns. However, Grischuk would be up the exchange. All in all, with perfect play, most likely a draw. But you know, it's hard to say how the game would continue. Grischuk, not happy with how this might play out, has to look further. But like I said, he doesn't have a lot of time on the clock. So let's check rook captures on e1, also a very interesting option. We're going to play bishop captures on e1, and now you have the option king captures on g7 or bishop captures on d5. If you go for bishop captures on d5, then you get knight to h5. And then, again, you have problems here. Bishop to c3 check is coming, and after the king moves, then knight to f6 check will pick up the queen. This is kind of the plan. So you'd have to move the queen, and then let's say bishop to c3 check, and now we go into some sort of a crazy perpetual. King to g8, knight to f6 check, king to f8, knight captures on d5. Now if black continues like this, opens up a discovery from the rook, you can't go here because then you lose the queen to knight to c7. If king g8, we repeat, knight f6 check, king g7. We can even go in front of the bishop, but let's say knight to e4 check. If king to g8, we repeat, and so on. Black is not getting out of checks here. There's simply too many files, and the diagonals are controlled by white to survive this. So what you would have to do after this is not go after the bishop. You'd probably have to go after this, but then we go into a similar line like in the king captures on g7. A little bit different because now we have rook captures, queen captures, and of course bishop captures. King captures, and then now king to f2. For example, rook to c8 and b3, kind of the same thing, only here the position would be something like this, and here the position would be something like this, but pretty much the same thing. So Grischuk doesn't want to play this endgame. After knight captures on d7, he decides for the third option, and that is bishop captures on d5, just eliminating one of white's bishops, which makes sense, but it allows also rook captures on e7, queen captures, and now knight to f5. So it's a bit of a different strategy, but the bishop is coming to d4. There's not much you can do about that. We have queen to f8. This is super important because the queen has to keep an eye on all of the squares where the knight can jump to. Bishop to d4 with check, king to g8, and this is not what we were talking about. If the queen was not covering the squares that the knight can use to deliver check to the black king, it'd be terrible. So here, white doesn't really have that many great discoveries. You have to waste a move capturing back the piece. So c captures on d5, and now Hao has this beautiful passed pawn. Let's see if he can do something with it. So here, Grischuk starts with h5, freeing up that square for the white king. Also in the future, maybe you can use it to bust open white king's position. d6, now there's trouble because now the e7 square is covered by the pawn, so knight to e7 check could be deadly. So king to h7, as the h7 square was now freed, and now comes knight to e7, attacking the queen here. And now the queen has to keep an eye on the f7 square. If you move the queen anywhere else, just rook to f7 check, and there is no escape. King h6, and now, for example, bishop to e3 is checkmate. The knight and the rook create a wall here, so the black king cannot escape. Also, this is covered, so this is just checkmate now. So, of course, this didn't happen. Queen to e8 was played by Grischuk, keeping an eye on the f7 square, and there's still this rook to bring into the game. So let's see what happens here. Here, Hao needs to continue mounting the pressure, and he does so with rook to f6. Rook to f5 is also very interesting if you could get somehow maybe rook g5, rook g7 check-in, but black can just continue with the development, and if rook to g5, you can just play queen f7. You really don't mind giving up the queen for the bishop and rook here, and then just continuing the game. And so rook to f5 may be a bit too slow. So instead, after queen to e8, we have rook to f6, and now Grischuk continues the same. You need to bring that rook into the game. And now if, for example, bishop to e3, going for some sneaky plans here, we can just eliminate the d6 pawn, and after captures, just capture the knight. Black is very happy playing this, even might be able to push for a win here. But here we have bishop to c3 instead, and Grischuk continues in the pretty much the same fashion. Rook captures on d6, we have rook captures on d6, queen captures on e7, and okay, now at least there's no bishop on e3 for the queen to attack, and now rook to d4. We have king to g6 and now a3, and after queen to e3 check, it was in this position on move 41. Now that both players have reached time control, that the players also agreed to a draw, as there is nothing more to be done here. It seems like there could be, but there really isn't. For those of you who don't believe me, let's just check. King g2, and now what can black play? The rook controls the entire fourth rank, so those pawns really aren't getting through. There's not much to be done here. The bishop guards this pawn, so this pawn guards this pawn. The queen alone is helpless here. Let's try pushing some pawns. Let's say a5. You can just repeat rook f4, rook d4, rook f4, rook d4. Nothing black can do about this. Let's say rook f4. You're going to push the other pawn. We're going to repeat rook d4. Now you can push, but I mean, nothing really is happening here, just captures. Now you have 3 squares where the rook can go to, even 4, so you can just move this rook wherever you want, and that's it. Black has no way of getting the king over the 4th rank due to the rook's presence here, and there's no way to increase the pressure. You can just do some checks, and that's it. So of course, after queen to e3 check, a draw was agreed upon, and that's just it. So we don't forget. Let me just show you guys the standings after round 10, also from Chess24. So Yanni Pomnici leading the tournament with 6.5 points, followed by 3 contenders: Fabiano Caruana, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, and Anish Giri. We have Wang Hao and Alexander Grischuk with 4.5, Kirill Alexenko and Ding Liren with 4 points. So really a crazy tournament. We'll see what happens. 4 more rounds to go, and I think anything can still happen. We'll see. It's gonna be a pretty crazy tournament, and we will get a challenger for Magnus. So yeah, that's the game. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Sorry about these videos maybe being a little bit longer, but this is classical chess. There's so much to explore, and the players. It's not like in Rapid or in Blitz. The players play this move, it's because of this and this. But in classical, players play this move, it's because, this can possibly happen, and then we could talk about it forever. So I'm trying to, keep the length reasonable, but sometimes it gets a bit out of hand. So sorry about that. But yeah, I would like to thank Vasudevan Srinivasan, Tony Carbonau, Piotr Pagovsky, Huval Blankovsky, and Sinan Telici for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Both of them will be from the candidates tournament if you're just joining in, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and of course whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.